When we come to practice the Buddhist path, they compare it to climbing a mountain. Our aim is to reach the summit of the mountain, but the pathway, the route we take up the mountain, might vary from person to person. Some people like to go very slowly, gently, walking, going up the mountain, but only increasing their height quite slowly. Maybe going round in almost like circumambulating the mountain, gradually going up the incline. Others like to rush head on, go straight up the north face, using equipment. Maybe they climb up straight up a rock face to find the quickest way to the top. Others make a mixture of the two. This is because people have their different karma. You have our different characters, backgrounds. And although there's only one summit to the mountain, and you're either there or you're not, the way up, we might adapt to our character. So teachers like Ajahn would often be quite flexible in their approach, not too fixed on techniques and particular ways of practice or views on the practice. Doesn't mean to say he couldn't be firm in his teaching style, but also for somebody with great wisdom and compassion, they understand that each individual might have slightly different emphasis and needs in their practice. Basically, he used to say we only need to understand 4 things. We need to understand, comprehend dukkha, suffering or stress, samudaya, its cause, nirodha, its end, Magha, the path of practice that leads to the end of suffering. So not a lot necessarily that we have to learn. Although some people do learn a lot. It's not necessarily wrong to study a lot, read a lot, hear a lot. For sure we have to absorb Dhamma from our teachers and from the suttas in the beginning. But we have to learn to internalize it. Some people only need a little bit and then already they internalize it. Some people like to contemplate a lot, think about the Dhamma a lot, so they absorb a lot of information. It's not necessarily wrong either. But in the end we have to learn to bring it in, internalize it. Pariyati, patibati, pativeta. What we study and learn from our teachers, we bring into our hearts and minds through the practice. What we remember, what we've learned, and we start to observe through experience. This is what leads on to the release from suffering that we wish for. Sometimes we might feel disheartened when we read the suttas. In the time of the Buddha, people, both Sangha and laity, might just hear one Dhamma talk from the Buddha and straight away comprehend these Four Noble Truths. And they attain the path, one level or another, maybe even all the way to full enlightenment, just listening to one talk. Maybe we've listened to hundreds of talks and it still doesn't seem to go in. Again, we have to accept everybody's parami and their karma is different. Obviously those ones in the time of the Buddha, and their parami was well developed, well cultivated. All the factors of the Eightfold Path were just ready to ripen, maybe even in one brief talk, reflecting on the Dhamma. Sila, Samadhi, Panya all became perfected, came to fruition in their mind. Maybe we don't have such a great accumulation of parami, so we have to be more patient and keep practicing. The more we dwell on this, maybe the more we'll doubt about our own ability to practice, or whether Magha is still possible. So more useful maybe is to keep coming back to the Four Noble Truths. Where does suffering arise? How to end it? And this is where we practice. Developing the skills, the awareness to understand the Four Noble Truths in our experience through the meditation, and developing mindfulness and wisdom in daily life. So we listen to the Dhamma. It's a bit like jump-starting a car that the battery's flat. Regularly our delusions, our kilesas take over the mind. So we listen to the Dhamma, it gives us that spark of wisdom, insight to help set us back on the path, get us practicing again. Sometimes we only need to listen to a little bit of Dhamma and already the mind gets it, understands and brightens up, and we know what we have to do. Other times we have to listen to a lot, really think about it, listen to it until gradually it goes in. It's like kick-starting or jump-starting the car. Sometimes just a little spark and we understand straight away. Other times you have to keep pushing the car and it judders and stutters until eventually the engine gets going. Sometimes we'll doubt about the proper method to meditate, the techniques. We hear about samatha bhavana, vipassana bhavana. Ajahn used to remind us that these come out of the same mind, they develop out of the same mind. They're two sides of the same thing. And sometimes it's appropriate to develop more wisdom teaching, sometimes appropriate to develop more samadhi, more concentration. Again, this depends on our character. Some people find just developing one-pointedness is more natural for them. They don't need to think a lot about the Dhamma, read a lot, hear a lot. They just go away and keep developing their meditation object, the breath, Buddha, over and over again in all postures. They keep one point in the mind until the mind quietens down and they start to understand. And sometimes the wisdom that arises is very automatic, without having to contemplate a lot. The mind already starts to see the impermanent nature of the khandhas, See the lack of self in these 5 khandhas. Other people, they can't one point the mind very quickly or easily. They actually need to develop wisdom and understanding to help do that. So they hear the Dhamma and think about it over and over again. And often have a practice where they're questioning their experience a lot in order to see deeper into the truth of things. It's very common for us to contemplate the theme of impermanence. Just over and over again, seeing the impermanence of our thoughts, feelings, the changing nature of the body. Just keep bringing the mind to that, questioning and watching things arise and pass away. Even though there's thought involved in this, it's just remembering impermanence as a perception, as a concept. But little by little it helps the mind to quieten down and let go of a lot of the hindrances and the distractions that normally bother us. Then maybe reach the point where the mind just becomes gathered, unified in samadhi. Then it no longer needs to think a lot, contemplate a lot. It's settled and it can observe and watch impermanence more easily. So there's different approaches we might take depending on our character, and we have to experiment a bit with the practice. We have the umbrella, the overall teachings of the Four Noble Truths, providing a structure, a framework, and then we have to see what works within this. Ajahn Chah used to say, if you're peaceful, then try contemplating. How do we know when we should contemplate? Well, when you're contemplating, does your mind wander off into more random, distracted thoughts, more worldly thoughts? That's a sign that maybe not yet ready to contemplate, and should return to developing stronger mindfulness, more peace, more calm. Use your samatha object for that. But if you're able to contemplate for a while without the mind wandering off, well, do that. If you're not sure what to contemplate, well, begin with the body, form, physical form. We have the 4 foundations of mindfulness as a vehicle for developing wisdom and insight. So we begin with the form, this physical form, this human body. Again, we can start questioning it, looking at it more closely. When you're calm, you can do this. The mind is more content, satisfied to stay in one area, with one subject. So learn to visualize your body, look at it as if you're standing next to yourself, looking back at yourself. It could be as you're just sitting here, or even imagine yourself lying down, even imagine yourself as a corpse and doing an autopsy on your own body. Start to look at it as it really is, rather than as how we think it is, or the image that we normally identify with. As we're contemplating, we're looking to see what's really there. As humans, we, out of habit, always identify with images of the superficial image of the human body, the beauty, the attraction. That's the normal way of our mind, but this may be coming from delusion. We have this way of looking at the body as a whole, as a compact unit. The hair, the skin, the facial features. The way the body presents itself as an image. We have our preferences for the body. We like our body to look a certain way. How often do we have an idealized image of our own body, and you look in the mirror, it's not quite how you imagined it in your mind. But even when you look at it, You're always looking at the superficial external image, the hair, the skin, the nails, what you can see, the eyes, the shape of the body. Now as we contemplate, and start being a bit more thorough and looking more closely at what's there. And take the hair off, unpeel the skin, take the eyes out, take the nails, the teeth out. Open up the skin and look underneath the skin, and the flesh, the bones, the blood, the organs, one by one. Look closely. And this is where we're developing some real wisdom, insight into the nature of this human being that we inhabit, this form that we identify with as self. And as we contemplate like this, and in that sense of the compactness of a human being, the kind of taking for granted of us as a person, a personality, I'm like this, my body is like this is me, this is you, other people's bodies, the beauty, the attraction, and so on. This is what we're questioning in an underlying delusion that we've held since we were born. Perhaps never questioned, never looked at more deeply. And now we are looking more deeply. Ajahn Chah used to say, when you imagine opening up your body, if you're doing an autopsy on your own body and you peel the skin off and look at the inside, it's not what you would normally like to see. It's ugly, unattractive, smelly, repulsive. He said it's like you go to your neighbour's house for a party or something and they give you a gift on your way home in a bag. You get home, you're satisfied, or you got a nice gift from your neighbour. You put it on your table, open it up, and it's a bag of snakes. So you reel back in horror. Oh, it's not what you're expecting, not what you wanted. So when you contemplate the body, it's like that. You're opening up to the truth. Oh, it's not as beautiful and attractive as we thought. It's not as desirable as we thought. Obviously, to contemplate like this is difficult because you're confronting your kilesas head on. It takes some peace, some continuity of mindfulness, some determination. It also takes some wisdom to guide it. And some people immediately have a very negative reaction. It can make them angry, disappointed, depressed to see the true nature of their body when they're looking at it. So you take it slowly, and you have to use the underlying peace of samadhi to support this practice. If it's bringing up a very negative reaction, well, maybe stop, turn the mind to think of something more wholesome, more calming. That's the kind of wisdom we have to use in the practice. We have to guide ourselves so that we're not doing something harmful to the mind. But we're not developing a new view to the body. Before we thought it was something beautiful, attractive. Now we're developing a view that it's something unpleasant, bad, negative. It's not like that. It's more just seeing what's there until the mind sees the normality, the true nature of the body. And if it's seeing with wisdom and mindfulness, then it's just going to feel normal towards the body or the bodies of others. It's not that we get stuck on the unattractiveness, like before we were stuck on the attractiveness, now we're stuck on the unattractiveness. It's more just from a neutral place of just observing the way things are. So you know this is how a human body is. It's not as our mind is used to thinking. You're challenging your former perceptions, bringing up the perception of asupha and anicca. You contemplate the way the body is changing, all the time as it ages, and how fragile and vulnerable to sickness it is. Every body part can get infected in some way, get injured, damaged, infected by disease in some way. We get skin disease, eye disease. We can damage our limbs and get injuries. And then we go inside and every organ can get a disease. The lungs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, the spleen, the guts, the blood, the lymph, the bones. In the end, where is there anything that is permanent and reliable, worthy of being a self, something to identify with and hold on to? This is what we're teaching ourselves as we contemplate, bringing the mind in line with reality, seeing the true way of this body. As we do this, then obviously contemplation uses up the energy, the peace of the mind. You'll find after a while you can't do it anymore. The mind wanders off the subject, wants to think of something more interesting or more distracting. That's one of the biggest problems we have in our meditation practice, when we practice every day, and distraction is always coming in. It's what hides the dukkha of the body and of the mind itself. The mind is, we don't see the dukkha of the body because we're always changing posture. You sit meditating for a while and then you start to get pain, discomfort, so you want to change, you want to wriggle around, move around, or just get up, finish sitting. Even if you do walking meditation, you keep walking, after a while you get pain, tiredness, so you want to sit down. At the end of the day you want to lie down. The Buddha said the dukkha of this body is hidden by posture, changing posture. The dukkha of the mind is more, it's a mental thing, so it's hidden by distraction. You contemplate for a while, then the mind gets tired, weary, looks for distraction. Even when we're doing samatha practice, just trying to one point the mind on an object, you're constantly battling with the tendency towards distraction. It's a habit. So the more we practice, the more we see the relationship with sila as well, how our sila restrains our natural tendency towards distraction. We bring up mindfulness with our posture, and then mindfulness with the way we use our mind and our senses. We practice sense restraint as part of our sila to support the development of calm, samadhi and wisdom. If we're constantly feeding the mind with distraction in our daily life, then when we come to compose the mind in meditation, it's difficult. It won't settle down very easily. It's always jumping onto the next object, wanting to do the next thing. So the practice of sila and samadhi, we can see how closely linked they are. If we're a little bit more disciplined and restrained in our daily life, then it's easier to calm the mind and one point the mind. The easier it is to calm the mind, then the more energy we have to contemplate. To do this, we also need to develop great patience, khanti, paramang tapotitika, patience and endurance, resilience towards the dukkha of the body, of the mind. So we're not just always giving into it, and changing posture and changing our object of mind through distraction, but actually be willing to sit through a little bit of pain and discomfort, sit through the restlessness of the mind with patience. As we do this, then we're giving the chance for wisdom to nurture the wisdom and for wisdom to mature in the practice as we start through experience seeing the nature of the khandhas. More and more seeing the nature of the body is the source of dukkha. It's not something that can bring us any ultimate happiness. it's impermanent. When we bring up mindfulness and start investigating, we see before we just sort of had this sense of the continuity and the permanence of the body. Since we're born, it's like we're here. It's as if we're going to be living forever, going on forever. But now we bring mindfulness to bear on the body, we see it's impermanent, it's changing all the time. And that sense of compactness, solidity of the body, as we contemplate, we're starting to separate out the different parts in our perception, then we start to see it's really nothing very solid or compact at all. All of this is teaching the mind to see the Dhamma and understand the Dhamma right close by, right in what we have right here, our own 5 khandhas. We don't have to go around far away to do this. Wherever you are in your day, in your practice, you've got the opportunity to bring up mindfulness and contemplate these things. The more we learn to sit meditation, walk meditation and practice in this way, the more important we see it is also to contemplate feeling, vedana. Again, like the body, feeling has been conditioning the mind since we were born. We're always attaching to pleasure, looking for pleasure, and reacting with aversion to pain and running away from pain, trying to avoid pain through our actions and our mental and physical actions. As we meditate more though, when we develop more patience and keep applying mindfulness, we're starting to break that habit, that cycle. You find as mindfulness becomes more continuous and there's more calm, then it's possible to contemplate pleasure and pain as feeling. You'll notice that desire always looking for a little bit more pleasure in life. You get familiar as you practice in what is pleasure as an experience and how is it conditioning and affecting the mind. As a monk, there's not so many things that bring us pleasure as in the lay life, so it's a little bit more feasible to contemplate this. Maybe it's very simple things that bring us pleasure, like food and drink, getting things. It's like when you really want something, some requisite, maybe you want a new torch or a clock, or you'd really like a little treat, like a bar of chocolate or something, and then you manage to get it. Somebody gives it to you, you're given it, you ask for it, you get it, you stick it in your yam, your shoulder bag, and you walk away. It's that sense of happiness or pleasure at getting that thing. But it's poison really, because it's bringing up attachment, it's feeding more desire for that pleasure if we don't contemplate it. It's feeding ignorance. We think we're happy, we walk away chuckling with ourselves, I got what I want, happy. But it actually makes the mind more dull to the Dhamma, more deluded. When that pleasure wears off, then it's back into dissatisfaction, seeking more pleasure. Observe that process at work. We get the pleasure, when we get what we want, the pleasure arises. And then there's the fear of losing it. Say that thing that you got, you put it in your yam, maybe you forgot where you put your yam, or you took the thing out but you forgot, and then you think, oh, I've lost it. And then immediately you get pain, don't you? You think the very thing you wanted, you've lost it. Where did I put it? You can't remember where you put it. As long as you can't find it, there's a pain already. Even in our simple lives as monks, we've got this opportunity to observe pleasure and pain at work, how it affects the mind, conditions the mind. More obvious is when we're sitting and walking. The longer you sit, the more painful feelings tend to arise. But as we meditate, we'll maybe we can develop some samadhi, develop some calm and some joy, and rapture arises, helps us to be more patient towards the painful feelings, gives us the steadiness to contemplate them and separate them, the mind that knows, from the pain. The aim is always to separate experience like this. Again, when pain is strong and mindfulness is weak, then the sense of the khandhas is very compact, solid, so we become that pain, that painful feeling. So that's all we know and that's all we can think about. So it's very unpleasant, so we desperately try to get away from it. But if there's some continuity of mindfulness, some calm, then we get some detached awareness, some aloofness from the pleasure and the pain that we experience. We can actually look back at these feelings as feelings with a sense of separation. As Ajahn Chah used to say, it's like oil and water in a vessel. They're there together, but they're not mixed. This is the effect of practicing mindfulness, developing mindfulness and wisely reflecting on our experience. You can actually separate between the pain and the knower. So the mind is just looking on at pain rather than getting involved with it. And the more we do that, the more patience we develop, the more wisdom we develop, then the more that ability to maintain detached awareness in all situations is improved. We're no longer creating the world out of our pleasure and pain. We're just seeing them as vibhaka karma. Vibhaka karma, the resultant karma of having a body is that you'll get pleasure and pain, but no longer identifying with it as self. It's me, mine, myself. Just seeing pain is pain, pleasure is pleasure. It's no longer conditioning the mind so much. So then it's not grasping and seeking these things or running away from them so much. The mind gets bolder and braver in the practice, is willing to put up with and endure a little bit more pain or go without some pleasure. Or if it does get pleasure, it's not so caught up in it because it knows it's impermanent, changes. One of the more refined kilesas that meditators have is that as we do develop more mindfulness and experience a little bit of samadhi, then we like it. We like the escape when the mind calms down. If you can develop that skill where you can experience some samadhi every day, and the piti and sukha arises, then it's pleasant, it's enjoyable. And in one sense that's not wrong, because we need the wholesome dhammas and the pleasure of these wholesome dhammas to train the mind, to separate and to be able to contemplate things. But it's also an addiction. And we see we need to balance the practice of samadhi with virya. And virya is that right effort, always on the guard to watch where unwholesome dhammas arise, and to cultivate wholesome dhammas, abandon unwholesome dhammas. And maybe we develop some samadhi, but then we like it, we want it, and we become a bit lazy or dull. Don't want to contemplate anymore, just to get to our state of peace and take that as good enough. So then we're reluctant to come out of samadhi and contemplate things. And when we can't attain our samadhi, we get irritable and frustrated. So you have to be vigilant, keep bringing up right effort in the practice to balance that habit or tendency to attach to the pleasure of samadhi. Keep contemplating. Remember back the pleasure of the samadhi, but also know it's impermanent, it's still a condition of mind. So as we practice what we've heard and read and listened to, we start to experience it for ourselves more. And we also have to start relying on ourselves more in the practice. In the beginning we're reminded by our teachers, other monks around us, what to do in the practice, how to do it, what to do, when to do. We often don't like that. But as we get more experience, we're actually learning to do that for ourselves. It's not that as you become more senior as a monk, nobody's telling you what to do anymore. If you're practicing correctly, you're actually telling yourself. Attano joti yatanang. It's a phrase Ajahn Chah like to quote. One has to remind oneself of the Dhamma, of the Vinaya, of the practice. We have to be one who brings up our own mindfulness, who's applying ourselves to the practice, contemplating, seeing where kilesas arise, contemplating the body, contemplating feelings, the mind, objects of mind. We have to be the one motivating ourselves, reminding ourselves, sometimes being firm with ourselves. We can't rely on external sources to do that forever. We have to learn to do it for ourselves. But if your goal is to get to the summit of the mountain, you really want to practice and you really want to experience the peace, not just the peace of samadhi, but the peace of wisdom, insight, then we have to do that. We have to learn how to goad ourselves, push ourselves along in the practice, just as if you're climbing a mountain. You can't rely on the Buddha or a teacher to do it all the time. You have to learn how to do it yourself. You pick yourself up when you're knocked down by the kilesas. Remind yourself when you get deluded and lost. Keep bringing yourself back to the path over and over again. We don't really need to look for experiences, special experiences either. If you're practicing sincerely, then you'll have plenty of food for contemplation, just in whatever arises through your own karma. The situations you're in, you'll always have challenges. Your kilesas will be challenged. Greed, anger and delusion will be coming up in different forms. The real challenge is to develop that continuity of mindfulness, and the intensity of mindfulness becomes more refined the more we practice. As kilesas, more refined kilesas are revealed to the mind, then the mind has to be more sharp, more intense in its efforts to see the kilesas and contemplate them. Just ordinary situations will arise that provide you with food for this. I remember once when I was a young monk staying with Ajahn, there was an invitation to go to bless a resort in Phuket, southern Thailand. If you think about it, it sounds like an ideal holiday for monks. All the monks went off, stayed down in a nice place, included going out in a nice glass-bottom boat, see the coral, nice food, different place to stay for a while. All sounded very attractive. So I was a young monk. I thought, I better not go. I'll just practice, stay in the monastery. So of course all the monks wanted to go. Just a few stayed behind. I thought, this is my time to practice, dedicate myself to practice. It just so happened there were a couple of visiting monks at that time. One was just senior to me, one was just junior to me. I was thinking, the next week everyone's away, I'm just going to do lots of practice, meditate, nice and peaceful. With these two new monks there, they didn't understand the way Ajahn Chah taught. They weren't ordained with Ajahn Chah. So they had different views on the practice. Whatever divides monks, and nothing divides monks more than views and opinions on practice. So they wanted to do things their own way. So they were always complaining about the way the monks did it in that monastery. Weren't happy, complaining. I was sitting in the middle of them. Whenever there was a meeting, there was the meal or drink. So I had one on one ear and the other on the other ear, complaining, and then they started to argue amongst themselves, so they argued through me. One was arguing to the other through me. After a day I thought, oh, this is exactly the opposite of what I wanted. I wanted to practice. Now I've got these two monks giving me problems because I was supposed to be responsible for the monastery while everyone was away. They're not peaceful. They don't understand how we do things. From being very peaceful place when the Ajahn was there, now the Ajahn has gone, it's like all the shackles are off. Everyone comes out fighting or arguing. Oh, this is completely turned on its head. What will I do here? I went back to my kuti the first day. I thought, I'm determined to do my practice, and all I could remember was what these two monks had been saying, complaining about the monastery, complaining about each other. They were so unpeaceful in themselves, and they were letting it out all the time, disturbing all the monks. I thought, well, the Buddha said you have to practice whatever posture the kilesa arise, just don't stop. It was the hot season, so I was doing a lot of walking meditation. I went back to my kuti, I started walking, and all I could hear was these two voices, as if one in one ear and one in the other ear. I just thought, well, I'm not going to stop meditating until these two voices have quietened down in my head. This is my time to practice. I'm not going to let these monks ruin it. So all day, the first day, I could just remember what they said, constantly disturbing the mind. Couldn't let go. So I thought, well, I'm just going to keep doing this. Keep walking. It's very hot. There's mosquitoes everywhere. You get sweaty and then the mosquitoes come and bite you. I thought, never mind, I'll just keep walking. I've got to get to a point where I can let go of these memories of what these monks have been saying. So I just kept going. Using Bhutto on the feet, Bhutto, Bhutto. As the mind calmed down, using the breath, even walking meditation, just focusing on the in and out breath. Little by little, just trudging on, getting bitten by mozzies, getting sweatier and hotter. I was just determined to let go of the memory and the attachment to the memory of what they've been saying, and the sense of self that forms about words, memories of what people have said, their views and opinions, the reaction, like this, don't like that, agree with this, don't agree with that, want this, don't want that. All the craving that these kind of things stimulate. Just keep letting it go, as if just sound coming up to the ear, letting it go. When I was with them, I was practicing like that, just hearing the sound, letting it go, with trying to practice detachment. When I was on my own, I was doing it with the memory of what they'd said, the verbalization, the thoughts, the views, the opinions. Just try and get to the point where the mind is peaceful in itself and not bothered by whatever anyone else is saying or doing. So after many hours, first day I didn't quite get there, but by the second day I could do it. Got to the point where I could completely drop any aversion, any attachment to what they're saying. It's like the mind got it, the penny dropped, and just maintain that mindfulness inside with the breath and with the mind itself, not letting anything come in to disturb it. Everything else just seeing as impermanent, not self. Just memory arising, passing away, thoughts arising, passing away, feeling arising, passing away, unpleasant feeling associated with those memories arising, passing away. Just keep doing it over and over again. You get to the point where the mind is calm inside, and there's this sense of separation from the khandhas, from the body that's hot, sweaty, tired, from the feelings, from the memories, the thoughts, even from sense consciousness, where you're aware of sound, where it's just sound arising, passing away, seeing arising, passing away. Got to the point where the mind just became very light, and then the body became very light. You might say fluffy, like cotton wool or something. So instead of feeling very hot and heavy like before, then it becomes very light, floating along the Jongrom path, no longer feeling tired or heavy, no longer feeling frustrated with the experience of dealing with these two monks. It's just all gone. And then the mindfulness became so firm, then you're walking around the monastery, it continued, whether I was sitting or walking meditation or just doing other activities, doing the chores, having the meal. That sense of light fluffiness just carried on. So in the end, wherever I was in the monastery, just maintaining that sense of very light, at ease, not attached. Those monks didn't change because that's the way they were. But then I changed. So I could sit with them, have a chat with them, and they'd carry on in their way. And they were sometimes obnoxious, sometimes disrespectful, sometimes difficult. Didn't matter. In the end, that's their karma, their conditioning. They have to deal with that themselves. Didn't make a problem out of it in the mind, just kept this light, fluffy state going as long as possible. So in that particular occasion, I learnt you can do that. Even when you're under pressure, you can learn to separate from different reactions and kilesas that come up. And when you do something like that, then you get a lot of confidence. It's like, oh, if I did it once, I can do it again. Maybe you can't always do it every time, but if you've done it before, you know you can do it, and then it's just a matter of effort and not giving up in the practice. And this is how we have to learn to practice. Our kilesas come up in different ways. There's different things that pull the mind, attraction and aversion. We're always looking for distraction to get away from the dukkha of the body, of the mind. We're always failing to see impermanence. We're always stuck with this self-image, sense of self-identity. We have no choice but just to keep looking into this and developing the skills of awareness, mindfulness, clear comprehension, and then just keep looking, investigating. Whatever way it presents itself, when the kilesas come up, just keep looking at them, investigating. Don't give in, don't give up. If you keep going, then gradually you're getting up the mountain. However long it takes, doesn't matter, as long as you're going in the right direction, you're still going up. So I'll leave you with these reflections tonight. Tonight is Magha Puja. We can dedicate our night to practicing, out of gratitude to the Buddha, to our teachers. We can put our full effort into the practice. It's the way we can show our gratitude and repay our debt back to our teachers, our parents, all those people who have helped us in our life and help us in the holy life, people who support us. This is the way monks can repay, through the practice. Don't think too much about the results, what will I get from it. Think more about how can I bring up the effort, bring up more mindfulness, more energy, bring up more wholesome dhammas in my mind. And then the time will pass very quickly. You'll find very quickly it's already morning. So anyway, I'll leave you with those reflections tonight.